If you like listening to Warriors in Their Own Words, check out our other show, the Medal of Honor podcast. The link is in the show description. I'm Ken Harbaugh, host of Warriors in Their Own Words. In partnership with the Honor Project, we've brought this podcast back at a time when our nation needs these stories more than ever. Warriors in Their Own Words is our attempt to present an unvarnished, unsanitized truth of what we have asked of those who defend this nation. Thank you for listening, and by doing so, honoring those who have served. Today, we'll hear from Staff Sergeant Alfred Bell. Bell served as a Tank Platoon Sergeant during World War II and fought in the Invasion of Normandy and the Battle of the Bulge as a member of the famous Spearhead Division. In this interview, Bell recounts the Battle of the Bulge where he lost his eye, a large portion of his left hand, and most of his fingers in order to successfully evacuate an Allied aid station.
My responsibility was also as a platoon leader, because we had lost our platoon leader. And I was assigned as platoon leader and platoon sergeant. And the fellow you just spoke with, Mr. Perio, was the squad leader of the second squad. I had the first squad. I was commander of all 5 tanks. It was a Stuart with a 37 millimeter, the lightest tank and the fastest vehicle they had in the tank. Other than what we lacked in gun power, we made up in speed. The gun power was the most important, but the armor was fine. We couldn't touch them unless we got them from the rear. And if we could get 5 tanks on one Tiger tank, and surround him, we could work on him like yellow jackets on a bumblebee, from hitting him on all sides. The only way we could get him is from the rear, and it was hard to get behind him. Most of the platoon that I had were reserves or draftees, and most of us at that time were regular Army. I was regular Army when they came in. So they respected the regular Army guys. And we had no problem with the recruits that we had. I don't recall at any time or any incident with anyone as far as them taking orders and directives as they were told to do. And throughout the war, after 6 years in the Army, I found that they were ready. When they got to us, they were put through training prior to be sent to combat, and we replaced our platoon, I guess, once or twice doing, or maybe more than that. Not quite 100% at each time, but we lost quite a few men. Had the replacements would come in, and you were talking about relationships with them. They were all very good compatible. We went there to do a job, and I would tell them that. Don't take any chances. When you can see it and you've got a chance and you see an opening, then take it. If you need help, call for it. But don't turn your back. I said the worst thing a soldier can do is to be hit from the rear. If you're going to get it, I say, get it going forward, going to the enemy, not running from him. And that was my philosophy, and they usually accepted it. Young guys, had one in there, 16, had falsified his age, and his parents had signed his paper. And he was killed in a tank in the second platoon, wasn't our platoon. And I told him that. He was from Tennessee, but he was one of my best soldiers, best drivers. He was a driver of the tank, and he was a good one, but he was killed in there. And I'm used that to illustrate how they were afraid. There's a 16-year-old. The rest of them were 18 to 21 or so forth that were drafted in. But this one volunteered at 16, but falsified his age and came in and died for his country. But he was a brave, good soldier. Well, while I was there, I was offered a battlefield promotion to become an officer, a platoon leader, a lieutenant, or a second lieutenant. They wanted to send me to OCS, and I'd been married 2 weeks when they decided they wanted to send me to OCS. And so this was at Fort Polk prior to the invasion. And I told them there wasn't enough rank in the world to separate me from my bride, which I just lost 5 months ago after 59 years, 1 month, and 18 days that she passed away. She was at the convention last year, and a rank didn't mean a thing to me, but I enjoyed my platoon leadership, and I have nothing against officers, but the relationships between enlisted men and were different and between an officer and an enlisted man, because I respected the rank of the officer. But there was a closer relationship and camaraderie between the enlisted men and the stripers with Mark. I guess that's the reason. I had close contact with my men. They never did desert me or leave me. And they supported me the whole 6 years I remember being in. The greatest maneuver I think we pulled as a light tank outfit was doing the Falaise Gap. We encircled the Germans, the British on our left, and we were on the right. And we were in the lead. There was a recon man back there, and the only thing in front of my tank and the British when we circled and connected the gap. But prior to the gap being encircled, it had been bombed by our Air Force, all the middle of it. And we met up with the Canadians in the center when we entered. And we had one recon vehicle in front of us. But that was the most important, I think, maneuver that we actually did, was to be the spearhead of the Falaise Gap, the largest area that was ever covered, and more prisoners captured in that area than any time during the war.
With the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up fast with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. Level up with Gourmet Plus options, prepared to perfection by chefs and ready to eat in record time. Treat yourself to upscale meals with premium ingredients like broccolini, leeks, truffle butter, and asparagus. Looking for calorie-conscious options? Try delicious, dietitian-approved, calorie-smart meals with around or less than 550 calories per serving. Need an extra boost to support your wellness goals and feel your best as you tackle a busy autumn? Try Protein Plus meals with 30 grams of protein or more per serving. With Factor, you can rest assured you're making a sustainable choice. We offset 100% of our delivery emissions, source 100% renewable electricity for our production sites and offices, and feature sustainably sourced seafood in our meals. This September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door. Ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. Head to factormeals.com/warriors50 and use code warriors50 to get 50% off. That's code warriors50 at factormeals.com/warriors50 to get 50% off.
Hello everyone, my name is Tom Kearns and I host the Anglo-Saxon England podcast, where I cover the history and culture of England from the departure of the Romans in the 5th century to the Norman conquest in 1066. So far we've surveyed the collapse of Roman rule in Britain, the migration of the Anglo-Saxons, and the history of Northumbria from its beginnings in the mists of legend to its destruction at the hands of Viking raiders in the 9th century. I hope you'll come and give it a go.
we had been assigned to block a bridge, and a battalion aid station was set up there, which had one doctor in it, a captain, I think, in the aid station. We had a group of wounded were brought in there throughout the regiment, were brought back there to the aid station. And when the German troops came over this hill that we were speaking of, you asked about that, and they had bazookas with them, and it was all infantry, black garbed Hitler troop youth. Some of them were 16, 17 years of age. It was his last resort, but they were the Nazi Youth Corps, the last groups that they had to send in. And they would sacrifice their life, and they had no stopping in them. They were always going forward. I never did see one of them run or turn his back and go the other direction. And they were coming over that hill fast. The aid station was 30 feet from my tank. The other 4 tanks were scattered out. We were in a circling, facing the hill that they were coming over. And so I got on my radio to get infantry support. We were there 5 tanks with 20 men with no infantry support and no artillery except our 30 millimeter cannon. These guys were coming in with tank bazookas. So we called, and I couldn't get out on my radio, which was a very small type radio with a platoon and company probably distance. So I knew they had a large radio, battalion-wide, at least we could reach out beyond it in the aid station. I told my driver then and my gunner in the turret, I said, now, if I'm not back in 20 minutes, you guys take off. I had a 45 Thompson machine gun and a 45 pistol on my hip, automatic. And I took my Thompson gun in 2 clips. And I had my pistol, and I got out. I said, I'm going into the aid station and see if I can call for support and get those wounded out of there if we can, and get them going down the railroad track, which was about a half a mile, and try to get them across that bridge. And if I'm not back, you go and set up a defense in this side of the river and try to hold those people back. In 15 minutes, I told them. And then I went in the aid station, and I told them to go down into this basement. There was a basement that they had an old bakery in this building. The aid station was on the first floor, and the basement area was a bakery. They had a big oven down in there where they baked the bread. And so I got on their radio, and the captain was there at the time, and I couldn't get no answer from them. Now, I thought our radios weren't working, but I've been told since I've been to come into these meetings, I was told I haven't been but 2 of these meetings in 57 years. And this is the second one. Last year, I found out that my radio and my tank and the aid station was working, but they were so occupied fighting themselves along that line that they couldn't give me or release any help back there with that platoon. So I went into the bakery, and the captain, he left the bakery. He went out of the bakery, commandeered my tank, and took off for the river. And there I was with a 45 Thompson and a 45 pistol on my hip. And there were those guys coming in with bazookas, and about 12 wounded and about 12 corpsmen in there. And I said, get them in the basement. We got them down there, and there was a back door. I said, that railroad track leads right to the bridge. So take all you can and get down there as fast as you can, because that's where our tanks are going to be. And they left. And I went back up the stairs, and here they were coming in. And my tanks had already headed for the bridge, I guess, because they were there. And they turned loose on me, and I turned loose on them. And when I came out of it, and later on that evening, I was the only one standing, except a young German trooper dressed in black, about 18 years old. And he put his gun down, his burp gun. He carried one of those, we call them burp guns that they had. He put it down, and he tried to help me because I had been shot up. I had used everything we got. And I said, we got down in the basement. I said, and he took his bayonet and he tried to take this hand off that was hanging loosely because everything had been shot away, the bone and the ligaments from the top, and tried to cut this off. You can see the scar here where he tried to saw it off. And I said, well, now you're a good buddy. He tried everything he could to stop my bleeding. I was shot here, and then I was shot out, and his hand was shot, and a shot was shot in the hip here, all that, and I was crippled. But I couldn't use my gun. I'd run out of ammunition anyway, and it was all over with. Because I asked Perio when he came down there and found me 18 hours later now. 18 hours later, I had bled there, and that German kid there with me in that cellar. We had gotten all the cords out of there. And just me and the German. And when Perio came in that night, that it was dark, I think. Was it dark? Yes, I believe it was. Well, everything was dark to me then because my eyes, every time I'd try to wipe my eyes, my right eye was okay, and I'd get blood in them from these fingers were shooting like a little faucet, So there I was. And Perio came down, he said, here's one of those German boys. And he didn't call him that. He called him a name, what a GI called him in those days. And he called him what he thought he was. I said, Perio, I remember this. This is the last thing I remembered now before I got back to Paris, France. I remember telling him, I said, Perio, if you shoot that fellow, if I live and I get out here, I'm going to try to get you court-martialed. I said, that young guy tried to help me and try to stop my bleeding, and I passed out. Next thing I knew, Perio had me, or next thing, and that was the next day he told me, the next day they had burned the upstairs of this building had been on fire and had burned down. And there I passed out from lack of blood then. No shot, no nothing in me, no penicillin. And he had brought a half-track, or Perio got some kind of vehicle, I don't know what, and they put me on there and got me back to an evac hospital. And that was Christmas Eve night. And this happened the 22nd or 23rd. And this was Christmas Eve night before. Then a doctor looked at me. And the nurses there, the lady nurses corps, were there, and they worked on me. And they were being shelled in. We had shells coming into that evac hospital. I recall that. When I would come to every now and then. I had bled so much. And they were shelling the hospital. And we were in tents there, just back from the lines, I guess, maybe 5 miles, if that far. But those big guns were shelling that evac hospital. And then I passed out there. They must have given me a shot. The next time I opened my eyes, I was in Paris, France, in a hospital, a general hospital. And there were reporters there, same as you fellows. I don't know how and why and who got the story out. They wanted to interview me there, and my doctors wouldn't let them. They performed surgery. And when I did come to, I remember the only antidote they had for me, they put a fifth of bourbon whiskey there by the bed that the guy had 2 hands next to me. They said, if he starts hollering too much, he said, give him a shot of that whiskey. And so I was pretty much in voice then to receive the reporters, and they came in. And they had the sword. This was in January. They had gotten me first part of January, Christmas Eve, after Christmas Eve, around New Year's. They got the story, and they spread it in Stars and Stripes, New York Herald Tribune. And so they put me on a plane with 12 other guys, old cargo plane, in 12 litter cases. How they got us on there, I don't know. Well, we got over to the Azores, I think, someplace down in there. And one of them is old twin engine deal. And one of them went out, so we had to go down there. And they worked on it and got it going. The next morning, then they flew us into Bermuda. Is that it? Off of the coast. And the other engine went out. And I recall saying this when they kept us so doped up to them. I said, I believe if we can make it one more hop without being drowned and survive, we'll survive this war. And so the next thing I knew, I woke up in a hospital in New York City there someplace. And they let me call my wife. And she had already received 3 telegrams. The first one was that I had died in action. The second one was I had lost my legs. The third one was that I was blind and had lost both arms. 3 telegrams. And so she was frightened to death. After 3 weeks in the hospital in New York, these were, I don't know what to call the hospital name, but it was a military hospital. And they sent me to William Beaumont General Hospital. And they said, William Beaumont, I assumed it was Beaumont, Texas. But it's in El Paso, Texas. And I spent 2 years in there for plastic surgery, replacing and all. And after that, it's all history. Those medics had gotten the story that I had gotten out of there, and they'd gotten back. The medics that were in the aid station there, and we had gotten them out, and they had carried the wounded out of it. That was a story that they had spread the story of what happened there. Sounds and how many, because there were civilians killed there. When they came in that house, they just opened up with their burp guns, and there were one little boy looked like he had polio was in there too, and a couple of older people. I understand that some of them were killed there. You might verify that with Pierre, because I never did get back upstairs after I was shot, And he said there were dead people up there, and dead Germans as well as civilians. And these medics had gone down the track. They got the story aired at the hospital out, what had happened.
Did the Army recognize you as a hero? Or?
No, they had mentioned it, but the heroes are still over there in Normandy. They didn't come home. I don't think. Only thing I have is a Purple Heart. That's all I expected. And it runs in my family. I guess my youngest brother was at Schofield Barracks when the Japanese bombed it, and he was there, and he was wounded 4 times. Had offered every medal. He turned it down and said all the heroes are there, and he came, and I held his funeral myself last year, and he was in the Army same time I was, but he went through the entire Japanese war. And so the medals don't mean a thing, and I wouldn't take one. And I refused him, and he did too. Because the heroes didn't come home. I was a volunteer, and I volunteered to fight for my country and for myself. Not a regret I have, unless it was a hurt that I called my wife. No, I don't feel sorry for myself. I'm a very fortunate person. And since then, the Lord has been good to me and provided ways that I got an education from it, which was more in payment back that I would have never gotten. I went on, worked on a doctorate degree at the University of Texas, and I became superintendent of schools of about 6 different school districts for 35 years and retired in 1979, and the wife and I became missionaries. And I lost her 5 months ago. And so that's about the end of the story. And I'm just waiting my time, enjoying every bit of it now as much as I can under the circumstances.
What does it mean to you to be able to gather with your friends in places like this for these reunions?
Well, for 50 some odd years, I didn't. But I think the story had to come out. I mean, I have enjoyed this more in meeting the fellow face to face that got me out of there, coming back. A lot of times in battles like that over there, if you see it's a total loss, you usually don't go back. But he came back, Sergeant Perio. And if he hadn't have come back, I wouldn't be here tonight to talk to you fellas. And I appreciate him, I guess, as much as any man that I've ever known.
What's that friendship mean to you?
It's indescribable. Closer as a brother, which I was very close to my younger brother that died a year ago. But he's as close as a brother as I've had.
Why do you think it's so strong, the bonds that you guys feel for each other?
In doing combat? Or
yeah.
Well, alone, your strength comes from being together as a unit. But if you try to fight a battle by yourself, it's lost before you even started against being outnumbered. But your friend there's brothers in the kinship that they're in combat now, I'm speaking of. Because while we were in England for 2 years prior to invasion, about that, 18 months or something like that. Maybe it wasn't that. It was 18. I was gone 18 months, that's right. But there's a bond and a friendship that develops there. I don't guess, unless you've experienced it yourself, if you could describe it. If he's in trouble and you're there, you're going to give him a hand. There's a brotherhood there that in combat that develops, that doesn't come about just from regular walk of life here at home. But you know that your life depends on him or that group you're with, your life. And I think that's what it is. It binds us together. And once you've experienced that, you have a brotherhood there that's stronger than anything I know of. And I've lived 82 years. Why, I don't know. I'm still here for a reason. Maybe just to tell you this story.
That was Staff Sergeant Alfred Bell. To learn more about the evacuation of the aid station and Sergeant Aureo Piero, who was mentioned in this episode, listen to our interview with Piero. The link is in the show description. Thanks for listening to Warriors in Their Own Words. If you have any feedback, please email the team at kharbaugh@evergreenpodcasts.com. We're always looking to improve the show. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review. Warriors in Their Own Words is a production of Evergreen Podcasts in partnership with the Honor Project. Our producer is Declan Roars. Bridget Coyne is our production director, and Sean Rule-Hoffman is our audio engineer. Special thanks to Evergreen executive producers Joan Andrews, Michael DeAloia, and David Moss. I'm Ken Harbaugh, and this is Warriors in Their Own Words.
Hello everyone, my name is Tom Kearns and I host the Anglo-Saxon England podcast, where I cover the history and culture of England from the departure of the Romans in the 5th century to the Norman conquest in 1066. So far we've surveyed the collapse of Roman rule in Britain, the migration of the Anglo-Saxons, and the history of Northumbria from its beginnings in the mists of legend to its destruction at the hands of Viking raiders in the 9th century. I hope you'll come and give it a go.